greetings to everyone who is in the building tonight, okay, and commentaries too. So I don't want to miss everyone. So yeah, greetings to Sunshine, greetings to my sister Eva, greetings to my brother Matt J, and everyone. I don't want to miss anyone. Okay, so as you might know, tonight we're gonna be doing a presentation in English because the person we are gonna be talking about is none other than George Washington, who is a major figure in American history, as they call it, the father of the nation. So we're gonna be finding out who he is in reality. Okay, if you do remember last time, the last presentation, we've proved to you that Georges Biassou was George III. Okay, so you might, if you have attended the last presentation, you have known that Georges Biassou, who is told in a Haitian history, okay, as we call it, Cocorat history, okay, bastardized history, is in reality George III, who was the emperor of the United Kingdom, okay, because they did tell you that he was a king, but in reality he was not a king, he was an emperor. So, nous connaissons, nous pourrons faire une belle présentation à ce faire. Nous pourrons le faire en anglais parce que gros information ça concerne George Washington et m'tarime que moun qui anglophone yo joine information ça parce que li important en pile et nous pourrons voir qui ça la bousculer dans monde yo, okay? So we're gonna be get it started. So before we start, I would like everyone to tap the screen, please, so that we can you can protect this live, because those are sensitive information. And if you can as well share this live to as many people as you can, so they can find the truth that we're gonna be talking about tonight. As you know, this kind of information you might not hear of. Okay, so we're gonna be starting. So please tap the live, share the lives, okay, to your friends, to everyone who might know this information. Today we're gonna be shaking the United States. So let's get started, my brothers and sisters in the building. Okay. So my sister, the Queen ICU, can you fix the screen, please, as you used to, like when you put it in a so that it can take the whole screen. I think it's gonna be better.
My dear ICU, can you please bring the screen up for us? Let it take the whole screen so Truth can have a lot of room to let this information explode on the world right now. Ma chère reine ICU, bakon sou la sou pa tande nou. There we go. That's perfect. Thank you, my dear ICU. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's great. So brothers and sisters, let's do this presentation. Okay, so as you know, okay, so today we're gonna be proving to you that the person in the middle is George III. George III, as you might know, is the king of, is a so-called king of England. And I'm going to prove to you that the one who we call George Washington is none other than George III. That means that the history that we were told is completely fake, is a scam. We're gonna be through it during this presentation. So let's get it started. Let's go. Okay, so as you can see the slide on the left hand side, okay, of the screen, you can see a picture of the so-called George Washington. As you know, he is not George Washington because, you know, the real one was melanated, and you know, he's a George Biassou, okay? If you compare those two pictures, on the left hand side, you see George Washington on a horse, okay, with his hat, okay? He's holding his hat, And on the right hand side, you can see George III, who is the so-called King of England, is on a horse. He's got his hat on his head. Okay, look at the similarities between those two, please. Can you see the similarity between those two persons on these pictures?
On the left, we have George Washington holding his hat. On the right, we have George III, or so-called King of England, also on a horse. And we're looking at the similarity with those two pictures and individuals. And we're just showing you now the falsification that they created between those two. So, son comparaison entre George Washington avec George III. George III était qui était soi-disant roi de l'Angleterre, en comparaison avec George Washington qui soi-disant président qui a fondé les États-Unis. N'a regardé les différences, n'a comparé, and we're going to compare the two. So we'll go back and forth, right? You know, as we're doing this presentation in English, we're going to give a little bit of explanation in Kreyol for our Kreyol speaking folks, given that this is our English presentation. So we're looking at the two different George. The George on the right is the so-called George III on the right, who is the known King of England. And then we're comparing him to George Washington on a horse, holding his hat. They're both on a horse, which is the formula that they use in order to start the falsification with many of the stories that they have sold. So, Truth, go ahead, my friend. You're going well.
Okay, so as you might notice, okay, those two horses, I've seen some good remarks in the comments section. The two horses are standing the same way. Okay, is lifting up his pound, is lifting up his pound, as you can see. Okay, the leg is lifted
left
up.
Leg up, left leg, two left legs up. Yes.
Okay, and okay, this is how they do the falsification. Okay, they used to take the same pose when they do pictures so that it can match as much as possible the character that you're trying to counterfeit. This is how they do the falsification. Okay, let's get it. Let's go further. Okay, let's see the birth date and the death date. So we're gonna be reading a bit so we can get a grasp, understanding of what the birth date and the death date of those two people are. Let's go. George Washington, okay, February 11, 1731, and December 14, 1799. So George Washington was allegedly born in 1731, and he died in 1799. Okay, what do they tell about him? Was a founding father and the first president of the United States. So in fact, George Washington was the very first president of the United States, serving from 1789 to 1797. So he's been serving for 8 years as a commander of the Continental Army. Washington led patriot forces to victory, the American Revolutionary. So they say he was a commander of the Continental Army, okay, against the British Empire. As you know, they mixed up lies with truth. We know that there are some lies in it, because we're going to be proving that he is no other than the George III, who is representing the British Empire. He is commonly known as the father of the nation for his role in bringing about American independence. Okay.
Can you make the screen a little dark to bring out the fonts? I'm trying to no, not to move it, just balance the darkness, bring it a little darker. And the contrast, voici écriture qui pop up plus, but you know, I'm just testing as you're reading so I can read with you. But go ahead, you good.
Okay, let's see George Biassou, as you call it in English. George Biassou was an early leader of the 1791 slave rising in Saint-Domingue that began the Haitian Revolution with Jean-François and Jeannot. He was prophesied by the voodoo priest duty bookman to lead the revolution. Okay, so if you look at the birth date and the death date, he was born the 1st January 1741 and he died the 14th July 1801. Okay, and look at his face, as we already shown that in the last presentation. You see this face on this coin. This is the face of George, the real face of George Bayasu, who is no other than the George III. Okay, let's get forward. Okay, so George Washington and George Bayasu. Okay, so George Washington was born in 1732. George Bayasu was born in 1741. George Washington died in December 14, 1799, and George Bayasu died July 14, 1801. So as you can notice, the death where has occurred almost the same year, 2 years gap. Okay, and the year of the year they were born, 1732 and 1741. So there is not much a gap between those two in terms of age. Do you get it?
They both died at roughly the same age, about the same age. Both the George Washington and George Biasu, which we're doing a comparison, and their age was approximately the same in the timeline that they gave us, if I'm correct. Truthfully, we don't hear you, my friend.
You hear me? Yes, correct. Okay, so there's not much of a gap between those two people in terms of dates. So this is how they operate when they try to do the falsification. They always like so that some years of gap difference, so it's not noticeable, but this is the way of operation. Okay, so let's get forward. Okay, so let's talk about George Washington now. Okay, what do they say about George Washington? The Continental Army was the army of the United States colonies, okay, representing the 13 colonies. So if you remember, we've done a presentation on the American Civil War. In the American Civil War, what we did say is that yes, the Continental Army was the army of the empire, but it has nothing to do with the United Colonies and the 13 colonies. Let me repeat. The Continental Army is in reality the indigenous army, okay, was the army of the empire, but it has nothing to do with the United Colonies and the 13 colonies. This is where they insert the lies in the story, because they've taken the Continental Army and they inserted the United Colonies, which is not for us, and the 13 colonies, which is not for us, because you can't be on your territory and you have colonies on your territory. It doesn't make sense. And you have 13 colonies in your territory. It does not make sense. If you are indigenous, we are not talking about colonies. Okay? And what they say, and later in the United States during the American Revolutionary War. Okay, let's get further. It was formed on June 14, 1775 by a resolution passed by the Second Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia, okay, after the war's outbreak at the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775. As a result, the U.S. Army birthday is celebrated on June 14. Okay, this number 14 we've seen quite of time. We've seen several times. We've seen the so we're gonna be talking about later, but we've seen this